So the key piece of text I decided to use from the book of Joel was Joel chapter 3 verse 13. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, get you down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for their wickedness great. Now the reason I really like this one is because there's sort of a double barrel effect when it comes to Joel chapter 3 verse 13, because we see multiple allusions to this in the New Testament in regards to Jesus. So the key thing here about the text we picked from Joel is basically that the scripture is talking about putting in the sickle because it's the harvest season. And if you read the whole book of Joel in its entirety and it's in the full context, Joel hammers away about 4 or 5 times in the 3-chapter book talking about the day of the Lord, the day of the Lord, the day of the Lord is coming. And right before he mentions the day of the Lord for the last time in his short book, he quotes this key verse and is talking about putting in the sickle because it's harvest time now and the fruit is ripe. Now the double barrel effect on this one is actually really powerful, and I'll just quickly talk about the first allusion that Jesus brings to this in regards to the New Testament. You can find that in the book of Mark chapter 4 verse 26 to 29, and this is when Jesus is given a parable. And he's talking about how the kingdom of God is like a man who scatters out seeds basically across the ground. It's not the more popular seed sower parable. It's only a couple of verses in the book of Mark, as I mentioned. And he basically talks about how when the harvest season is fully come, and this is the time, basically the man that scattered the seed, which is obviously the Son of Man, which is Jesus, it's time for him to put the sickle in basically and basically reap the harvest. Now if you follow on with this theme in the Gospels of Jesus, he clearly talks about how he's the guy that's sowing the seed. Obviously the ground is the world, and obviously at the end of the world he's basically gonna put in the sickle and obviously reap. And another parable which kind of references this way, he's talking about the wheat and the tare. He's basically gonna separate those out at the end of the harvest. So I wanted to mention that parable very briefly because it does have some reference to what Joel's talking about. And now I want to get into the key piece of text which I think really doubles down on this really clearly and categorically and is really in tune with the timeline specifically, and that's in the book of Revelation. Now if you follow the timeline like I kind of outlined for you in the book of Joel, where Joel is basically talking about the harvest time comes, the sickle goes in, and then the day of the Lord comes and there's the big battle. When you get to the book of Revelation, chapter 14, we're going to focus on 14 to 16, but the chain of events, as I've kind of outlined for you in the book of Joel, and when if you read it, you'll get to see it as well, really plays dividends when you read this piece of text here in Revelation. Now I'm going to recommend you read the whole of chapter 14 for even wider context and what we're going to be talking about here. But let's read what it says in Revelation 14, verse 14 to 16. It says, "And I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the cloud sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, Thrust in thy sickle, and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped." So as you read this text, it's talking about one like the Son of Man sitting on the clouds basically with a sickle in his hand. An angel comes out of heaven and says to the guy sitting on the cloud, thrust in the sickle basically, and obviously reap the harvest. Now going back to what we discussed in Mark and obviously some of the other parables I mentioned and referenced in today's video, and even reading the context of Revelation 14 and the text we read today, it's quite clear that this is talking about Jesus in all 3 examples pretty much, thrusting in the sickle basically and reaping the harvest before the great and dreadful day of the Lord as discussed in Joel chapter 3. Because even if you continue reading in Revelation, what's going to happen next is the people are going to be gathered together for the great battle. And when you read in Joel, again, the book, he's talking consistently about going to the valley of Jehoshaphat and the valley of decision, where there's going to be a great battle, where we're going to tread down the winepress and all these different kind of things. But this is clearly talking about Jesus coming basically, reaping the harvest, dividing everyone out and getting everyone prepared at the end of the world for this great battle where he's going to basically go up against his enemies and he's basically going to wipe them out totally. So this is the second addition to our Minor Prophets series, and if you want to continue along with us as we go through these minor prophets, to encourage you to go through the minor prophets, I'm going to recommend you subscribe to the channel to get updated every single time we produce new videos. And what I'm also going to recommend is you watch this video right here. It's a great video for you to watch as we continue on the theme of Jesus fulfilling prophecies in the scriptures. Thanks and take care.